I'm 56 years old, and I've spent most of my life being told I'm too soft. My ex-wife Marion used to say it. My colleagues at the manufacturing plant say it. Even my daughter Sylvia says it, though she phrases it nicer, calls me easygoing or flexible. But I learned something important on our last family trip. There's a difference between being soft and being strategic. And when people mistake one for the other, they stop paying attention to what you're actually doing. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. My name is Brooks Carven, and I work in procurement at a mid-sized manufacturing plant outside Charlotte. It's not glamorous work. Most days, I sit in a cramped office reviewing vendor contracts and purchase orders, making sure nobody's paying twice for the same shipment or getting swindled by a supplier who inflates prices quarter after quarter. People walk past my door without looking in. The younger managers think I'm a relic, somebody who should have retired 5 years ago. But I'm good at what I do. I notice details. I remember patterns. And I know how to read the fine print. 10 years ago, when Marion and I split up, I bought a small condo near Myrtle Beach. It wasn't big, 2 bedrooms, a narrow balcony with an ocean view if you leaned far enough over the railing, but it was mine. The divorce left me with almost nothing except my paycheck and a decent credit score, so I saved for 3 years, living in a cramped apartment with furniture I'd pulled from the curb on trash day. I ate rice and beans 4 nights a week. I skipped lunches. I canceled my cable and stopped buying coffee anywhere but home. Every extra dollar went into a savings account I labeled Future because I couldn't bear to write starting over on the folder. I told myself the condo would be a place where Sylvia could always come back to, a safe space, somewhere she'd remember her dad loved her, even after everything fell apart. The day I signed the closing papers, I sat in the empty living room and cried, not because I was sad, but because for the first time since the divorce, I had something that was truly mine. She used it a lot in her 20s. Spring breaks, long weekends, once a full month between jobs. I never asked her to pay for anything. She'd show up with friends, and I'd stock the fridge before I left. I'd drive down, hand her the keys, then turn around and head home so she could have the place to herself. That was fine. I liked knowing she was happy there. I liked that when she thought about the beach, she thought about me in a good way. Not as the dad who forgot her recitals or missed her graduation because of work, but as the dad who gave her a place to breathe. Then she met Tanner. Tanner Pike is 30 years old, works as a sales manager for some regional logistics company, and has the kind of personality that fills a room before he even walks into it. Loud laugh, firm handshake, always talking about deals he's closing, clients he's impressing, places he's going. He's the kind of guy who introduces himself to strangers at parties and walks away with their business cards. Sylvia loved that about him. After years of dating guys who couldn't hold a job or forgot her birthday, she'd found someone ambitious, someone who made plans and followed through. I was happy for her. I really was. When they got engaged, I helped pay for part of the wedding. I sat in the front row and smiled through the ceremony, even though Tanner's best man gave a speech that made 3 jokes about old guys trying to stay relevant. When they talked about buying a house, I co-signed a loan, even though Marion called me from across the state to tell me I was being foolish and that Tanner had user written all over him. Tanner's parents, Gerald and Linda Pike, own a small supply business that services hardware stores across 3 counties. They're not rich, but they're comfortable, and they care intensely about appearances. Gerald wears a Rolex he bought used and talks about it like it's an heirloom passed down from his grandfather, even though everyone knows he got it from a pawn shop in Colombia. Linda dresses like she's heading to a country club luncheon even when she's just getting groceries. She carries designer bags with the logos facing out and mentions our lake property in casual conversation, even though it's just a small cabin they rent out most of the year. They raised Tanner to believe that image is everything, that people respect you based on what you drive, where you vacation, and who you know. And somewhere along the way, Tanner learned that borrowing someone else's success is easier than building your own. The first time Tanner and Sylvia brought his parents to my condo, I thought it would be a nice way for everyone to bond. I took a few days off work, drove down early, and made sure the place was spotless. I even bought fresh flowers for the kitchen table and stocked the bar with expensive whiskey I'd seen Gerald mention on social media. When they arrived, Gerald walked in, looked around, and said, "Not bad for a beach place. Little small, but it's got good bones." He didn't say thank you. He said it like he was appraising property he might buy. Linda asked if the complex had a gym and seemed disappointed when I said it was just a basic setup: pool, outdoor showers, covered parking. Tanner joked that next time they'd have to upgrade to a place with better amenities, and Sylvia laughed along. I didn't say anything. I told myself they were just adjusting, that it was natural for in-laws to have opinions. I poured drinks and made dinner and listened to Gerald tell stories about his business for 3 hours straight without once asking me a single question about my life. That trip set a pattern. Over the next 2 years, Tanner and Sylvia used the condo more than I did. Sometimes they'd invite me down for a long weekend, but more often, they'd just text me to say they were going with Tanner's parents or some friends from his company. I'd say sure, have fun, and I'd update the guest list with the front desk so they could check in without me. Sylvia started calling it our family beach spot, which felt nice at first. I liked the idea of it being a gathering place, somewhere everyone felt comfortable. But then Tanner started calling it the Pike Family Retreat. I noticed it during casual conversations. He'd mention the condo to coworkers at company events and say things like, "Yeah, we've got a place down at Myrtle, perfect for client weekends." Or he'd post pictures on social media with captions like, "Another successful quarter deserves another trip to our beach base." I saw one where he'd tagged his parents, his college buddies, and a few people I didn't recognize. No mention of me. No mention that the place was actually mine. When I asked Sylvia about it, she sighed like I was being difficult. "He's just excited, Dad. It makes him feel successful to have a nice place to bring people. Isn't that what you wanted? For it to be a family spot?" I didn't argue. I figured if it made her happy, it didn't matter whose name was on the deed. But late at night, lying in my cramped apartment, I'd think about the sacrifices I'd made, the years of saving, the weekends spent alone, the quiet pride I'd felt when I first handed Sylvia those keys. And I wondered when exactly I'd stopped mattering in my own story. At work, my friend Howard Cass, he's the guy who handles contract compliance and has a side hobby of helping people navigate legal paperwork, started ribbing me about it. We were sitting in the plant cafeteria one afternoon, and he asked how the condo was treating me. I mentioned that Sylvia and Tanner had been down there 3 times in the past 2 months, and Howard raised an eyebrow. 3 times? You charging them rent?" "It's family," I said. "Why would I charge rent?" "Because if nobody pays, they stop seeing it as yours," he said, stirring his coffee with a plastic stick that looked like it might snap at any second. "They start seeing it as theirs, and then one day you're the guest in your own place." I laughed it off. Howard's a good guy, but he's paranoid about people taking advantage. He once refused to lend his brother-in-law a lawnmower because tools have a way of becoming gifts if you're not careful. I figured he was projecting. Sylvia wouldn't do that. She's my daughter. She knows how hard I worked for that condo. But then came the text message. It was early April, and we'd planned a family trip, me, Sylvia, Tanner, and his parents. Sylvia had suggested it a month earlier, saying it would be good for everyone to spend time together, and that Gerald and Linda were really excited to get to know you better. I was excited. I hadn't been down to the condo in almost 6 months, and I was looking forward to a quiet week by the ocean. I packed light, brought a couple of books I'd been meaning to read, and drove to the airport feeling lighter than I had in months. At the departure gate, Sylvia gave me a hug and thanked me for letting everyone use the place. I thought it was a sweet thing to say, but Tanner laughed and added, "Basically, the Pike's vacation base now, right?" Gerald chuckled. Linda smiled. Nobody corrected him. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I forced a smile and said nothing. When we landed and picked up the rental car, Tanner drove. He didn't ask, just took the keys from the counter and headed to the driver's seat like it was a foregone conclusion. Gerald sat up front with him, and Linda, Sylvia, and I squeezed into the back. The whole drive, Tanner and Gerald talked about restaurants they wanted to try, boat rentals they were looking into, and whether the weather would hold for the deep-sea fishing trip they'd apparently already booked. I wasn't mentioned in any of the plans. At one point, I tried to suggest a seafood place I'd been to before, and Gerald talked right over me, saying he'd already got reservations somewhere better. At the condo complex, I handled check-in. The front desk manager, Alex Novak, recognized me and greeted me warmly. "Mr. Carven, good to see you again. Same unit as always?" "That's right," I said, handing over my ID. Gerald stepped up beside me and loudly asked Alex if there were any owner perks that could get us upgraded to a unit with a better view. Alex looked confused and glanced at me. I quietly shook my head. "This unit has a great view, sir," Alex said politely. "And Mr. Carven is listed as the owner, so everything's already set." Gerald frowned like he'd been told the restaurant was out of his favorite dish. "Owner perks should mean something," he muttered. We hauled our bags upstairs. I unlocked the door and everyone piled in. I'd left the place clean, but Sylvia immediately started rearranging things. She moved a small photo of her and me from the mantel into a bedroom drawer and said they needed space for Tanner's parents' stuff. I watched her tuck the frame behind some folded towels and felt something cold settle in my stomach. That photo was from her college graduation, one of the few events I hadn't missed. That afternoon, we went down to the pool. I'd been looking forward to it. There's a nice outdoor bar area, and I wanted to sit in the sun with a cold drink and maybe chat with Sylvia about her new job. But as soon as we got there, Tanner started holding court. He ordered a round of drinks for everyone, tipped the bartender with a flourish, and started telling a story about a big client he'd just landed. Gerald jumped in with his own business tales, and Linda laughed at all the right moments. I sat at the edge of the group, sipping a beer nobody had asked if I wanted. At one point, the bartender asked Tanner if we were staying nearby. Tanner grinned and said, "Yeah, my parents paid for a long-term spot here. We come down all the time." I blinked. My parents paid for a long-term spot? I opened my mouth to correct him, but Gerald was already nodding along, saying something about good investments and family traditions. The bartender smiled and moved on. Nobody looked at me. I sat there with my beer getting warm in my hand, realizing that in the span of 5 hours, I'd gone from owner to invisible. Later that evening, as we walked back from the pool, I fell a few steps behind the group. Gerald was talking about next year's trip, suggesting they make it an annual thing. He glanced back at me and said, "Brooks, maybe next year you could just send us the keys. Save yourself the travel if it's getting too much at your age." I stared at the back of his head. At your age. I'm 56. I'm not ancient. I'm not feeble. I work 45 hours a week and run a household and drive 6 hours to get to this place I paid for with money I earned. And this man just suggested I'm too old to be here. Sylvia didn't say anything. She didn't tell him that was rude. She didn't remind him whose condo it was. She just kept walking, scrolling through her phone, liking photos from friends who probably had no idea her father even existed. That's when my phone buzzed. I pulled it out and saw a text from Sylvia. I frowned. She was 10 feet in front of me. Why was she texting instead of talking? I opened the message. "Dad, we need to talk about the condo." My stomach dropped. I stopped walking. The group kept moving toward the building, and nobody noticed I wasn't with them anymore. I stood there on the path, staring at the screen, waiting for the rest of the message to load. It came through a moment later. We know this is your condo, but we want time alone with my husband's parents, Dad. Please go to a hotel. I read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. Go to a hotel. My own daughter was asking me to leave my own condo so her husband's parents could have it to themselves. I stood there on the walkway, listening to the ocean in the distance and the sound of distant laughter from the pool. My hands were shaking. I wanted to call her. I wanted to march upstairs and ask her what the heck she was thinking. But another text came through before I could move. It was from Tanner. Hey Brooks, no big deal. Just figured it'd be more comfortable if we had some space. We'll make it up to you later. No big deal. I looked up. The group had reached the building entrance. Gerald held the door open for Linda and Sylvia. Tanner glanced back, saw me standing there, and gave a casual wave. Then they all went inside. I stood there alone. For a long time, I didn't move. I just looked at my phone, at the condo building, at the beach in the distance. I thought about the years I'd spent saving for this place, the months of overtime I'd worked to cover the down payment, the weekends I'd spent driving down here just to check on things, to make sure it was ready for Sylvia whenever she needed it. I thought about every time I'd said yes when she asked to use it, every time I'd smiled and nodded when Tanner bragged about their place, every time I'd swallowed my pride and told myself it didn't matter as long as she was happy. And I thought about Howard's words. If nobody pays, they stop seeing it as yours. I took a slow breath. Then I opened my phone and typed a reply to Sylvia. No problem. That's all I said. No argument, no questions, just no problem. I saw the little read notification pop up immediately. A moment later, Sylvia sent back a heart emoji and, "Thanks, Dad, you're the best." I turned and walked back toward the parking lot. I didn't go upstairs. I didn't pack my things. I didn't knock on the door and make a scene. I just walked to my rental car, sat in the driver's seat, and stared at the steering wheel for a while. The sun was setting, casting orange light across the dashboard. Somewhere nearby, a family was loading beach chairs into their trunk, laughing about sunburns and sand in their shoes. Normal people. People who probably didn't get kicked out of their own vacation homes. Then I pulled up the booking app on my phone. The condo complex uses a property management system where owners can control guest lists, authorize payments, and update check-in details remotely. I'd barely ever used it. Usually I just called the front desk if I needed to make changes. But I'd set up the app years ago, and it was still there on my phone, logged in and ready. I scrolled through the current booking. My name was listed as owner. Sylvia was listed as primary guest. Tanner was listed as secondary guest. Gerald and Linda were listed as additional authorized visitors. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I tapped on Tanner's name and hit remove. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to remove this guest from the authorized list? They will not be able to check in or access the property without owner approval. I tapped confirm. Tanner's name disappeared from the list. I did the same thing with Gerald, then Linda. Now the only names on the booking were mine and Sylvia's. I scrolled down further and saw a section labeled Payment Authorization. It listed Tanner's corporate credit card as the backup payment method. I frowned. I hadn't authorized that. I didn't even know it was there. I tapped on the card details and saw a string of past charges, dates and amounts for previous stays, some of them labeled as business travel or client entertainment. My stomach turned. Tanner had been using the condo for work trips and charging it to his company, and from the looks of it, he'd been doing it for over a year. I removed the corporate card from the payment list. Then I scrolled through the settings until I found a notification option. Require owner approval for any payment method changes. I toggled it on. Finally, I found a section called Check-in Requirements. There was a box that said, Require primary guest and owner to be present together for key issuance. I checked the box. The system updated instantly. A confirmation email hit my inbox. Booking details updated for Unit 12B. I closed the app and sat back in the car. My hands had stopped shaking. My chest felt tight, but not in a panicked way. More like the way you feel when you're holding something heavy, and you know you can't put it down yet. I started the car and drove a few blocks until I found a budget hotel. The kind of place with scratchy sheets and a vending machine in the lobby that only took exact change. The receptionist, a tired-looking woman in her 40s with reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, checked me in without asking questions. When she handed me the key card, she mentioned that a lot of people came through here after issues with vacation rentals. People think they've got a booking, and then something goes wrong with the payment or the ownership or whatever, she said, shaking her head. Happens more than you'd think. Had a family in here last week, showed up at some beach house and found out the listing was fake. Lost $2,000. I nodded. Yeah, I bet it does. The room was small and smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and old carpet. I dropped my bag on the bed and sat down. The mattress sagged in the middle. The TV remote was bolted to the nightstand. Through the thin walls, I could hear a couple arguing in the next room. My phone buzzed. It was a group text from Tanner with a photo of the condo living room. Gerald was holding a drink and grinning. Linda was on the couch with her shoes off. Sylvia was smiling in the background, holding up a wine glass. The caption read, "Perfect family trip. This place never gets old." I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I opened my contacts and scrolled to Howard Cass. He picked up on the second ring. "Brooks, you okay? Aren't you supposed to be at the beach?" "I am," I said. "Sort of. I need to ask you something." "Shoot. If someone uses a family-owned property for corporate travel and charges it to their company without disclosing that the property is owned by a family member, is that a problem?" There was a pause. I heard the sound of a chair creaking, like Howard was sitting up straighter. Yeah, that's a problem. That's a conflict of interest problem. Most companies have strict policies about that. You're supposed to disclose any financial relationships when you're booking company travel. If you're staying at a place owned by a relative and you're charging the company for it, you've got to report it. Otherwise, it looks like fraud. What if the person told coworkers and clients that the property was theirs, that they owned it? Another pause, longer this time. "Brooks, what's going on?" I told him. Everything. The text message, the booking changes, the corporate card I'd found in the payment system, the way Tanner had been bragging online, the way Gerald and Linda treated the place like it was theirs. When I finished, Howard let out a low whistle. Man, that's not good. For him, I mean. If his company finds out he's been using a family-owned condo as a business perk and not disclosing it, he's in serious trouble. And if he's been billing it as client entertainment or travel expenses, that's even worse. That's misuse of company funds. That's grounds for termination. What should I do? Nothing dramatic, Howard said. Just forward the evidence to his company's compliance department. Don't add commentary. Don't explain. Just send the booking confirmations and the screenshots of the payment history. Let them handle it. They've got protocols for this stuff. Will that really do anything? Oh, yeah. Companies take this stuff seriously. They'll freeze his travel account, launch an investigation, maybe even loop in HR. And if his bosses find out he's been bragging about it like it's his place, that makes it worse. Shows intent to deceive. Shows he knew what he was doing. I sat there on the hotel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Thanks, Howard. Anytime. And Brooks? Yeah? Don't feel bad about this. He did it to himself. You're just making sure the right people see what's already there. I hung up and opened my email. I forwarded 3 booking confirmations and a screenshot of the payment history to an address Howard had given me, the compliance inbox for Tanner's company. I didn't write a subject line. I didn't add a message. I just hit send. The email disappeared into the void. I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't feel soft. I felt sharp. The next morning, I woke up early and walked along the beach. The hotel was a few blocks from the main strip, so the sand here was quieter, less crowded. A few joggers passed by. An older couple walked hand in hand near the waterline. I watched the waves roll in and thought about what came next. Tanner and Sylvia had planned this trip for a full week. 4 more days. 4 more days of them living in my condo, posting pictures, making plans, talking about future summers. 4 more days of me being erased. But I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to show up at the door and demand to be let in. I wasn't going to send angry texts or make phone calls. I was going to let the systems do the talking. I walked back to the hotel and checked my email. There was already a response from Tanner's company, an auto reply thanking me for submitting documentation and confirming that the compliance team would review it within 48 hours. I smiled. Then I called the condo complex front desk. Alex answered on the 3rd ring. "Hi, Mr. Carven. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said. "I just wanted to confirm something about the booking. I updated the guest list yesterday, and I enabled a setting that requires me to be present for key issuance. Is that going to cause any issues with the current stay?" "No, sir. The current guests already have keys. That setting only applies to new check-ins." "Good. And if someone tries to use a different payment method, say a corporate card, will the system flag it?" "If you've set the payment authorization to require owner approval, then yes. Any attempt to add or change a card will trigger a verification call to you. And if there's any discrepancy with the account, we'll put a hold on check-in until it's resolved." "Perfect. Thanks, Alex." "No problem, Mr. Carven. Let me know if you need anything else." I hung up and sat back. Everything was in place. Now I just had to wait. 2 days passed quietly. I stayed at the hotel, walked the beach, read my books. I found a small diner that served breakfast for $4 and sat at the counter every morning, drinking bad coffee and watching locals come and go. I didn't hear from Sylvia except for a few cheerful group texts with pictures of meals and sunsets. Tanner posted more photos online, one of him and Gerald holding up fish they'd caught, another of Linda and Sylvia at some boutique. Gerald left a voicemail thanking me for loaning out the place and saying they'd definitely be back next year. I didn't respond to any of it. On the 3rd night, I got a call from Howard. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "I just heard through a friend at Tanner's company. They froze his travel account this afternoon, sent him an email saying they're conducting a review of his expense reports." "Already?" "Yeah. Compliance doesn't mess around when it comes to financial stuff. They probably saw the booking confirmations and cross-referenced them with his travel claims. If he's been charging personal trips as business expenses, they've got him cold." "What happens now?" "They'll interview him, ask for explanations, request documentation. If he can't justify the charges or if he lied about ownership, they'll escalate it. Could be a suspension, could be worse. Depends on how much money we're talking about." I thanked Howard and hung up. Then I opened the booking app and checked the calendar. The family had one more trip planned, a long weekend in June. Sylvia had mentioned it in passing a few weeks ago, saying it would be a celebration weekend for Tanner's promotion at work. They'd invited his parents again. I'd said, sure, sounds great, and Sylvia had booked it through the app using the shared guest access I'd given her months ago. I stared at the June booking. Then I tapped on it and changed one detail. I set the primary guest of record to Sylvia Carven only. I removed Tanner from the authorized list. I removed Gerald and Linda. And I added a note in the system. Owner must be present for check-in. Any corporate or third-party payment attempts will require verification. I saved the changes. The system updated. Another confirmation email hit my inbox. Then I called the front desk one more time. "Hi, Alex. It's Brooks Carven again." "Hey, Mr. Carven. What can I do for you?" I've got a booking coming up in June. I just updated the guest list, and I want to make sure the check-in process goes smoothly. Can you put a note on the account that keys will only be issued to me and my daughter Sylvia? Nobody else should be able to check in, even if they have a credit card on file. Absolutely. I'll flag it now. Is there anything else you need? Yeah. If anyone calls asking about the booking or trying to modify it, can you route them to me first? Of course. I'll add that to the account notes. Thanks. I appreciate it. No problem. We'll make sure it's handled correctly. I hung up and closed the app. Then I leaned back and let out a long, slow breath. Everything was in place. All I had to do now was wait for June. The rest of the April trip ended quietly. Sylvia texted me on the last day to say they were heading home and thanking me again for being flexible. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. When I got back to Charlotte, I fell into my normal routine: work, groceries, quiet evenings in my apartment. Nobody at the plant asked about my trip. Nobody noticed I seemed different. But I was different. I could feel it. I started paying closer attention to things. At work, I reviewed vendor contracts with extra care, flagging clauses that could cost the company money down the road. My boss noticed and sent me an email thanking me for catching a billing error that would have cost them 6 figures. Howard stopped by my office one afternoon and raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "Look at you," he said, "actually getting credit for your work." "About time," I said. He grinned. "You're done being invisible, huh?" Something like that. May passed. I didn't hear much from Sylvia except for the occasional text about work or weekend plans. Tanner's social media went quiet. No more posts about the beach. No more photos of drinks by the pool. I wondered if he was starting to feel the pressure from his company's investigation. In early June, I got an email from Tanner's company. It was addressed to me directly, thanking me for providing documentation and informing me that their internal review had concluded. They didn't give details, but the tone was formal and final. I forwarded it to Howard without comment. He called me 5 minutes later. "I heard through the grapevine," he said. "Tanner got suspended, 2 weeks without pay, and they're making him repay the company for any personal charges he made to his travel account." "How much are we talking?" "From what I heard, a few thousand, maybe more. Depends on how many trips he claimed. And they're not done. HR's reviewing his position. If they find more violations, he could be looking at termination." I didn't say anything. I just let the information settle. "Brooks, you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here." "You okay?" "I'm fine." "Good. Because I think you're about to get your condo back. For real this time." 2 weeks before the June trip, Sylvia called me. It was late on a Thursday night, and I was half asleep when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but I saw her name and picked up. "Hey, sweetie, everything okay?" There was a pause. Then, "Dad, we need to talk." My stomach tightened. "What's wrong?" "Tanner's been having some issues at work. He got suspended for a couple of weeks. Something about expense reports and travel policies. It's been really stressful." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "He's really upset. And his parents are upset too. They keep asking him what happened, and he won't talk about it. It's been tense at home." "I can imagine." Another pause. "Are we still good for the June trip? I know you've been busy, but Tanner's parents were really looking forward to it. They think it'll be a good chance to relax and get away from everything." I sat up in bed. "Yeah, we're still good." "Great. Thanks, Dad. You're the best." "No problem." She hung up. I sat there in the dark for a long time, staring at the phone. Then I set an alarm for the morning and went back to sleep. On the day of the trip, I drove down early. I didn't tell Sylvia I was coming. I just packed a bag, got in the car, and made the 6-hour drive to Myrtle Beach. I arrived at the condo complex around noon. Alex was at the front desk, and he greeted me with a smile. "Mr. Carven, good to see you again." "You too, Alex. I wanted to check in early and make sure everything's set for the booking this weekend. Absolutely. Let me pull it up. He tapped at his computer, then nodded. Yep. Primary guest is listed as Sylvia Carven, and you're noted as the owner who must be present for key issuance. Nobody else is authorized to check in. Perfect. Are you expecting any issues? I smiled. I'm expecting clarity. Alex raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Well, if you need anything, just let me know. I will. Thanks. I went upstairs to the condo and dropped my bag. The place was exactly as I'd left it in April, clean, quiet, and mine. I stood on the balcony for a while, listening to the ocean and feeling the weight of what was about to happen. Then I went back downstairs and sat in the lobby. An hour later, Tanner's car pulled into the parking lot. I watched through the lobby windows as he, Sylvia, Gerald, and Linda climbed out. They were laughing, carrying bags, looking relaxed. Gerald was wearing his Rolex. Linda had on oversized sunglasses. Tanner was talking loudly about the seafood restaurant they were going to hit that night. Sylvia looked happy. She always looked happy when she was with them. They walked into the lobby, and Tanner headed straight for the front desk. He didn't see me sitting in the corner. Nobody did. I was invisible again. Tanner slapped his credit card on the counter. Hey, checking in. Last name Pike. Alex glanced at the card, then at his computer. I'm sorry, sir. I don't see a reservation under that name. Tanner frowned. What? No, it's under Carven, Sylvia Carven, but I'm handling check-in. Alex tapped at the computer again. I have a reservation for Sylvia Carven, yes, but it's marked as owner-supervised. The owner must be present to issue keys. Owner-supervised? What does that mean? It means Mr. Brooks Carven, the owner of the unit, needs to be here for check-in. Tanner's face went red. That's ridiculous. We've checked in without him before. Just give me the keys. Alex stayed calm. I'm sorry, sir. That's the policy on this booking. The owner has specifically requested that he be present. Gerald stepped forward, his voice loud enough to turn heads. This is absurd. We've been coming here for years. Just check us in. I can't do that, sir. The owner has to approve key issuance. Tanner pulled out his phone. Fine, I'll call him. He didn't get the chance. At that moment, the front desk phone rang. Alex answered it, listened for a moment. Then his expression shifted. He looked at Tanner. Is this your number, sir? He showed Tanner the caller ID screen. Tanner blinked. Yeah. Why? It's your company's compliance department. They're asking to speak with you urgently. The lobby went silent. Tanner stared at the phone like it was a live grenade. What? Why would they call here? I don't know, sir. But they said it's urgent and they need to speak with you immediately. Tanner grabbed the phone. Hello? I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I could see Tanner's face going from red to pale to gray. He kept saying, I can explain, and it's not like that, and there's been a misunderstanding. Gerald leaned in. What's going on? Tanner waved him off, stepping toward the corner of the lobby. But his voice was getting louder, more desperate. I didn't lie. It's a family property. Yes, I used it for work trips, but no, I didn't disclose it because, look, this is a private matter. You can't just, no, wait, please. Linda whispered something to Gerald. Sylvia stood frozen by the desk, looking between Tanner and Alex with growing panic. Then Gerald's phone rang. He pulled it out, frowned at the screen, and answered. Hello? His expression changed instantly. What? No, I didn't authorize. What charges? How much? He stepped away from the group, his voice rising with each word. That's impossible. I didn't... Wait, you're saying my business card was used for what? When? How many times? Tanner was still on the phone with his company, his face now sheet white. Gerald was pacing near the entrance, shouting about fraud alerts and unauthorized charges. Linda looked like she might be sick. Other guests in the lobby were staring now, pulling out their phones, whispering to each other. And Sylvia just stood there, staring at Alex. "What's happening?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible. Alex glanced at me, and I gave him a small nod. He printed something from the computer and handed it to Sylvia. "This is the guest of record page for your booking, ma'am. Your father, Mr. Brooks Carven, is listed as the owner. You're listed as the sole primary guest. Nobody else is authorized to check in or access the property. These changes were made by the owner several weeks ago." Sylvia took the paper with shaking hands and read it. Her eyes scanned the document once, twice, 3 times. Then she looked up and saw me sitting in the corner. "Dad?" I stood up and walked over. "Hi, sweetie." Her face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, understanding, hurt, anger. "You're here? You knew about this?" "I knew you were coming," I said calmly. "I'm the owner. I'm always here when someone checks into my condo." Tanner turned around, phone still pressed to his ear. He saw me, and his jaw dropped. "Brooks, what did you do?" I didn't answer him. I looked at Sylvia. "Let's get you checked in," I said. Alex slid a key card across the counter. "Primary guest, Sylvia Carven. Owner present. Everything's in order?" Sylvia took the key with numb fingers. Behind us, Gerald hung up his phone and stormed over. His face was purple, veins standing out on his forehead. "Tanner, what the heck is going on? The bank just told me my card's been flagged for repeated condo charges I never approved. They said you've been using it to pay for trips here for over a year." Tanner's face went from gray to white. "Dad, I can explain." "Explain what? That you've been using my business account to pay for vacations? That you've been lying to me? To your company? To everyone?" Linda grabbed Gerald's arm, her voice shrill. "Gerald, not here! No, I want to know what's going on." Gerald turned to me, his finger jabbing toward my chest. "Brooks, what did you do?" I met his eyes. "I didn't do anything. I just forwarded some booking confirmations to the people who needed to see them. Tanner did the rest himself." "You—" Gerald's face turned an even darker shade of purple. "You set him up. You sabotaged him." "No," I said quietly. "I just stopped pretending I didn't notice what he was doing. I stopped being invisible." Tanner hung up his phone. His hands were shaking. "They're making me repay everything, every single charge. They're saying I committed fraud. They're talking about termination." The lobby went completely silent. Even the couple who'd been checking in at the other end of the desk had stopped to watch. Then Linda turned to Sylvia, her voice desperate. "You need to fix this. Your father did this on purpose. He's trying to ruin Tanner's career. He's trying to destroy our family." Sylvia looked at her mother-in-law like she'd been slapped. "My father didn't do anything. He owns this condo. He's always owned it. You all just acted like it was yours. That's not fair. It's completely fair." Sylvia's voice cracked, echoing in the lobby. "You told him to leave. You told him to go to a hotel, in his own place, and I let you. I texted him and told him to leave." Gerald pointed at me again. "He's manipulating you." "No," Sylvia said, her voice breaking. "You manipulated him, all of you, and I helped you do it." She turned to Tanner. "How much do you owe?" Tanner wouldn't look at her. "A few thousand, maybe more. They're still calculating." "And the suspension?" 2 weeks, without pay, and they're reviewing my position. If they find anything else, I'm done." Sylvia closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she looked at me. "Dad, I'm so sorry." I nodded. "I know." She looked at the key card in her hand. Then she looked at Tanner, at his parents, at the mess they'd all created together. "We need to go home, right now." "Sylvia." Tanner reached for her. She stepped back. "Now." Gerald and Linda started to protest, but Sylvia cut them off, her voice sharp and final. "You're not staying here. None of you are. This is my father's condo. It's always been his condo, and I should have said that a year ago when you first started treating it like yours. She handed the key back to Alex. Cancel the booking. Alex looked at me. I nodded. Booking canceled, he said. Sylvia turned and walked toward the door. Tanner scrambled after her. Sylvia, wait, we can talk about this. But she was already gone, pushing through the glass doors into the bright afternoon sun. Gerald and Linda stood there, staring at me. Gerald's face was still purple. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. This isn't over. Yes, I said quietly, my voice steady and clear. It is. They left. The lobby was silent again. A few guests were still staring. Someone's phone was out, probably recording. Alex cleared his throat. Mr. Carven, that was just the truth, I said. He smiled slightly. Well, the truth was pretty brutal. I picked up the key card Sylvia had left behind. Then I walked upstairs to my condo, opened the door, and stepped inside. The place was quiet. The ocean breeze came through the open balcony door. Everything was exactly where it should be. I set my bag down, poured a glass of water, and stood on the balcony, looking out at the waves. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sylvia. I'm sorry, Dad. I should have stood up for you. I should have said something a long time ago. I typed back, you said it when it mattered. A moment later, can we talk when you get home? Of course. I love you. I love you too. I put my phone down. For a long moment I just stood there, feeling the sun on my face and the wind in my hair, listening to the ocean crash against the shore below. Tanner's corporate account was frozen. Gerald's business card was flagged for fraud. The condo was mine again, not just on paper, but in reality. And for the first time in years, I wasn't soft. I wasn't invisible. I was exactly where I belonged.